Dragon's Dogma 2. Oh boy, I've been waiting 12 years for this sequel. Time to start my adventure! Hey there gamers! Do you find yourself struggling to beat video games nowadays with extended playtimes and life's responsibilities? What if you could beat a video game without actually playing it? Well, now introducing Time Savers. No, not those. This guy. You can now pay an extra $30 for someone else to beat the game for you. That's right, for only $100 you can beat a game in record time, leaving you more time to spend with your kids or whatever the fuck you do.
Oh my god.
So next time, remember Time Savers and go fuck yourself. Hello y'all, I'm Troy, and today I'm going to be taking a look at Capcom's new action RPG, Dragon's Dogma 2, which has been quite the hot topic lately, whether it be microtransactions or performance issues. A lot of fans are upset with DD2, and rightfully so. We will touch on all that, but is this game actually that bad, or is it that good? Let's go ahead and take a look. Personally, I was very excited to get my hands onto Dragon's Dogma 2, as I was a fan of the 2012 original. Now, that was when I was balls deep in 2011 Skyrim, so I didn't quite sink my teeth into Dragon's Dogma 1 as much as I believed it deserved, but I do prescribe to the belief that the original was overlooked and underrated. It was a very unique and creative experience for its time, with its pawn system and very interesting and dynamic boss fights. I do remember having a lot of fun with it, but I was pretty young, so I didn't quite appreciate it as much as I could have. So how does Dragon's Dogma 2 compare? Well, after sinking 55 plus hours into it, completing the main quest, doing a little bit of Endgame, and trying out all those vocations, this one's really hard for me. Because on one hand, I'm having so much fun and I love Dragon's Dogma 2, and there's a lot to love about it. But on the other hand, there are a lot of issues. Most of them are little gripes, but I really believe there are some huge missed opportunities. With this sequel taking 12 years and the great groundwork that Dragon's Dogma 1 laid down, this follow-up had some serious potential. My expectations were kinda high and they were not entirely met. Because in the end, Dragon's Dogma 2 doesn't really address any of the problems of the first game. It doesn't do enough to truly evolve this formula in any meaningful way. Even so, I am having a lot of fun with Dragon's Dogma 2, and I do not regret spending a single dime or any of my time playing through it. I'll just say up front, if you loved the first game, you're definitely going to love the sequel. It's a good, extremely unique experience that is honestly kind of hard to summarize and compare to other games. So let's go ahead and start breaking all that down. I'll be describing my experience with Dragon's Dogma 2 and pointing out what I think worked and then what I think didn't work. But of course, before we dive in, I gotta do my normal YouTube stuff, so please subscribe if you haven't already, yada 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 yada. But in all reality, please let me know down below, what do you think of Dragon's Dogma 2 if you're playing it? Is there a bunch of technical issues? Am I completely wrong? Is this the best game you've ever played in your life, or is it complete dog water? So without further ado, let's go ahead and take a look at Dragon's Dogma 2. Bars. Again, I got bars.
Each victory emboldens the Arisen's spirit and prepares them for the inevitable showdown with the indomitable dragon. The culmination of both their destinies. Welcome to Dragon's Dogma 2.
In Dragon's Dogma 2, you again take the mantle of the Arisen, a chosen one, literally chosen by a dragon, who wields the power to control pawns. Creatures that resemble humanoid races of this land, but their sole desire is to serve you as the Arisen and ensure that your every desire is met, as well as let you know about every single chest and ladder and anything of note that you are within 50 meters of.
There's ought to be found there. Can you not see it?
We ought to take a closer look.
It seems we must venture to Trevo Mine.
Shut the fuck up!
I believe
It's helpful and novel the first few times, but after a while, I just kind of want to slap my pawns around. The Arisen is also the rightful sovereign of the nation of Vermund, which is roughly half of the Dragon's Dogma 2 map, the other half being the neighboring desert nation of Batal. However, you as the Arisen have lost all memory of your past, and a pretender sits upon the throne of Vermund. So this kicks you off on your adventure to retake the throne and fulfill your destiny. Dragon's Dogma 2 is an RPG with a big focus on action and combat. The main draw and focus here is fighting monsters. So you'll venture out and tackle quests alongside a party of 3 pawns. One is your main pawn, which you create yourself, as well as the Arisen, with a very thorough character creator. The other 2 pawns in your party can be selected and changed out anytime through Riftstones. This includes an array of pre-built pawns from Capcom, or if you're playing online, you can download other players' pawns, including your friends, which is always a jolly good time. And there is plenty of content in DD2. My first playthrough took me a bit over 50 hours, so there's plenty there. Some people say they beat this game in like 25 to 30 hours, which sure, if you just beeline the main story, you can pull that off, but that's not really how you should be playing this game. So that's a quick rundown. As usual, let's go ahead and start off with what I liked, which is quite a bit. Starting off with the aforementioned pawns, which I think is Dragon's Dogma's main standout feature. Pawns are the key mechanic that I believe really drives home its unique feel. They're just such a great and creative system and unique spin on multiplayer. I think it'd be really cool if like FromSoft took kind of a system like this and incorporated it in one of their games, but wouldn't that be cool though? This is in part because the character creation is very detailed and thorough. Like Jesus, you can even customize your pawn's gait and posture. I've traveled and slayed monsters with both Danny DeVito and Leon Kennedy at the same time.
Choose a sorcerer for your service, Arisen, and you shan't regret it. My magics shall decimate your foes.
Hello, derivative.
Do you know how video game NPCs kind of have a reputation of being either useless or just in the way? Well, not pawns. Pawns are extremely valuable and useful in many different ways. One way is with questing and exploration. You see, if a pawn, either yours or another player's, has assisted in a quest in another player's world, they will bring that knowledge on how to complete that quest back into your world. They'll give you hints, but most of the time, they'll just lead you directly where you need to go. And quests can be kind of obtuse in Dragon's Dogma 2 and aren't so easily laid out like in most modern RPGs. So utilizing pawns is a very creative way to mitigate this that puts agency on the player. And it's not just quests. Pawns will also point out hidden chests or items that other players have discovered. Pawns are also incredibly useful in combat. Now the AI is actually pretty competent, but it's not perfect. You know, 1 second your pawn will be throwing another one into a critical point of a boss and then inflicting massive damage. And then another, they'll be jumping off a cliff or refusing to heal you. They make mistakes and pull off epic moments as real humans would, and it keeps you on your toes. And maybe this is a hot take, but it actually makes encounters more dynamic. Your pawn isn't just gonna have aimbot and shred. It's like a human, right? In general though, fighting alongside your pawn is a treat, and you never feel like a babysitter. I will say the repetitiveness of the pawn's dialogue does kind of wear on you a bit, but it also kind of adds to their charm. Like they are just simultaneously the most NPC of NPC followers with their extreme passion for subservience. But then you'll also form attachment to them as they're extremely useful and have surprisingly unique personalities amongst themselves. Now let's go ahead and move on to another big strength of Dragon's Dogma 2, the vocation system. Vocations are just your typical RPG classes, and the initial 4 you start with are your standard warrior, archer, thief, and mage. However, you unlock more as you progress through the game, and there are some extremely unique ones. You'll also dictate your main pawn's vocation, but some of the more advanced ones unlocked later in the game are only available to the Arisen. Which, side note, I don't get this decision. Why not make all vocations available to all pawns? I think that would really make picking your party comp more interesting. Each vocation feels very different to play, with wildly different and customizable movesets. I wasn't a huge fan of every single one, but there is something here for everyone. My personal favorites were the Thief for your high damage glass cannon build that excelled at scaling huge monsters to target weak spots. The Warrior because when isn't it super satisfying to just bonk enemies with a giant hammer? And finally, the Magic Archer because it's just OP as fuck and literally aimbot. It's a lot of fun. Now, I'm definitely a variety is the spice of life guy. It's always hard for me to main one character or class in games because I like to change it up. I have restarted Skyrim halfway through a playthrough like a cajillion fucking times. I like to see what the game has to offer. Hell, I play a whole bunch of different video games. I can never seem to be addicted to one for too long. So why did I go on that tangent? Well, my favorite part of the whole vocation system is how easy it is to swap between them and that it's actually encouraged. Straight up, NPCs will say, hey, don't be afraid to swap vocations. You're actually at a little bit of a disadvantage if you don't swap vocations because there's certain abilities that can transfer between them. It's like this system was made for me. Vocations are leveled up separately from your character's level. So your stats will scale with your character's main level, but as you level up your vocations, you'll unlock new moves and abilities. This enables you to never feel too underpowered if you do change vocations. You'll also reach max level in a vocation fairly quickly, obviously encouraging you to grind another one. I maxed 3 vocations out of a total of 9 in my first playthrough and got pretty close with a few others over the course of about 50 hours. You'll also progress by obtaining new items and weapons, which for the most part is pretty good. It's a basic system with new gear usually having straight stat boosts or better damage, but the way you upgrade them is interesting through different smithing techniques found across the map that specialize in different buffs. For example, the smith in Batal will be better at upgrading weapon damage, while the smith in Vermund is more well-rounded with magic and defense. On top of all this, the weapons and armor look pretty badass, which is always very, very important. The enemies in Dragon's Dogma 2 are also, a treat to fight, with the big selling point here being that you can scale your monsters. Just the physics engine at work here is just really good. The way your character moves and clings onto monsters or can use the environment to jump off of a cliff. You can just do some really cool badass moves here. The enemy AI is pretty competent as well. They can create some dynamic encounters as they will occasionally pick you up and toss you off a cliff or douse you in oil and light you on fire. Cool stuff like that. So with the pawns, the physics, the enemies, the badass vocations with some real sweet moves and powers, this all creates a very dynamic and just straight up addictive combat. At first, it can seem a little janky, but once you progress into some vocations and get the hang of it a little bit, it's a great time. Next, I want to talk about the open world design and the exploration, which is fantastic. Initially, I was actually put off a bit because at first glance, the map seems rocky and mountainous with a lot of interconnected narrow paths, which can be true a lot of the time. However, these paths are constructed in such a clever and unique way to where there are still plenty of secrets to be uncovered and interesting areas to find. You'd be surprised too how many times you can go off this path and you're rewarded for it. I think you can definitely feel a little bit of, Dark Souls inspiration here. But I do think a lot of people will struggle to enjoy this part. For me, it took a little bit of learning because if you just follow these paths to your next destination, you're not going to get that rewarding exploration. Things are hidden a lot of the times in Dragon's Dogma 2, and it does take some digging. There isn't markers or a tower off in the distance you can just walk to, or if there is that tower, it won't always be easy to get to and will require some looking around. But once you sort of unshackle yourself from that Ubisoft-esque open world mentality where you just kind of mindlessly follow yourself to the next point and just take your time and organically explore, you will find the exploration is extremely rewarding, and this world that Capcom has created, beautiful. There are some areas of the world which are much more open as well. Specifically, Batal has a large basin area with a lot of sweeping views. There are a handful of different biomes and cultures here as well, so that helps keep the world looking and feeling fresh. Kind of going off that, the visuals and graphics here are awesome. I played on PS5, not PC, unfortunately, for reasons I will get to later, but even on PlayStation, the textures are pretty detailed and character models looked surprisingly good. Now, the facial animations, not so much, except in a few key moments, but overall, the models are highly detailed. The lighting in particular is great. I'm not a huge technical visual guy, definitely more casual when it comes to these sort of things, but this has to be one of the first games where I really noticed ray tracing and just how realistic it makes the world look. This is especially noticeable during the amazing day-night cycle. During nighttime, it's basically pitch black. I mean, you can sort of adjust and use the light of the night sky to see very faintly, but then the way your lantern illuminates your surroundings and how you can see light off in the distance, it's just all so sweet and extremely realistic. It is dangerous, but you eventually come to love the thrill of traveling at night. Finally, the last thing that I'll mention that I enjoyed is the variety of endgame. I'm not going to spoil anything, but there are some different endings here, and one of them, or the true ending, is a mechanic in itself that I think has a lot of potential for interesting things to happen. That's all I'll say. Just know it's good. The ending in general is pretty good. Now, unfortunately, that is all I can really say about Dragon's Dogma 2 that really stood out to me. Now, let's talk about what I didn't like, which is mostly smallish gripes, but they kind of add up. One is the quests. The side and some of the main quests are just kind of lame. There are some decent ones, but overall, kind of a disappointment. When looking at reviews of DD2, I heard a lot of, oh, there are no quest markers and you really got to think about what to do and yada yada, which is true for a decent chunk of the quests, but that's kind of overblown. A lot of the quests here do have a marker on the map that say, go here and talk to this person, which isn't necessarily bad, but my point being that a lot of the quests here are just kind of boring. I've seen a lot of reviewers raving about how a good amount of the quests are timed, and yes, that does add a certain flavor to a given playthrough, but in my opinion, just because a quest is timed, that does not make it interesting if the writing, story, and characters behind it are still shit. Now sure, you can say, well, Dragon's Dogma isn't about the questing. It's about just exploring this world and fighting monsters and finding these things out for yourself. And I say, yes, sure, that's definitely when I was having the most fun and how I recommend you play the game. But I answer to that, why not have both? Have cool quest lines and cool organic exploration. This would have been a huge step for Dragon's Dogma, but they just didn't take it. And if we shouldn't engage with the quests that much, then why the fuck are there so many of them? My quest log kept filling up and I wanted to ignore the majority of them. Capcom wasted a lot of time just putting boring bullshit quests in here. Then there is this really interesting NPC mechanic where any NPC can die, even quest givers, locking yourself out of a specific quest line, but then you can use an item to revive them. Now this alone isn't bad, it's actually really interesting on paper, but it doesn't really seem that Dragon's Dogma goes deep into this mechanic. Like that's actually the only reason you'd revive an NPC, at least that I encountered. I didn't revive a single person on my playthrough outside of curiosity because I didn't decide to go on a murdering spree. Like, are there any quests that play to Dragon's Dogma's strength that utilize this interesting mechanic or, involve unique monster fights? None that I encountered. And some of the quests you do need to do in order to get some more of the powerful moves or to advance the story, of course. I just remember there's one quest chain that had me like sneaking into a castle, but there are no stealth mechanics. I just ran past the guards and they didn't give a single fuck. Just like, what? Why am I doing this? Why? And a lot of these quests, you're just running back and forth, and it wouldn't be so bad if there was some good characters behind them, but unfortunately, these are shit too. There are no interesting characters outside of one, Wilhelmina, who maybe I just thought was interesting because she was kind of sexy and tingled my underdeveloped male prefrontal cortex. I can't even say that word, prefrontal cortex. Just kidding, I'm older than 25, so that shit's definitely fully developed. Anyways, yeah, her questline is okay, but everyone else is just boring. It doesn't help that the writing is pretty stale and that the voice acting can be outright bad.
I beg your forgiveness for my insolence, Your Majesty. If the Queen Regent had learned of your existence, I fear your life would have been in peril. I had no choice but to treat you as a pretender, lest my actions draw suspicion from watchful eyes.
There are only a few instances where you can actually ask an NPC questions. Usually you walk up to them and they just give you 1 or 2 lines of dialogue, and that's about it. It's not very immersive. Now, I know this might be how the first game was, and it definitely isn't the focus of Dragon's Dogma, but this is one of those huge missed opportunities I mentioned. Imagine if Capcom had fleshed out the dialogue and characters a bit more. It would not only give more meaning and depth to the quests and the world, but would be a huge leap in the right direction for Dragon's Dogma as a series. I will say the main story and quest is mostly good, a bit slow at times. It's just the side quests. Just forget about it. I mean, maybe I didn't quite dive into it enough because it turned me off. If anyone did find some more interesting quest lines, please let me know for the New Game Plus. Now, I do have to give credit for the Sphinx side quest, but that is kind of a whole separate beast in itself. But like, why weren't there more interesting things like that? Now, let's go ahead and talk about the traversal and the fast travel. If you're unaware, in Dragon's Dogma 2, you can use ox carts to spend a very small amount of gold to travel between major cities, or you can use fairy stones to teleport to port crystals, both of which are very rare to find, so you'll be hoofing it most of the time. Now, I don't think that the limited fast travel here is bad. No, I think that actually makes sense for a game like Dragon's Dogma 2. But there are some design choices that, when paired along with the limited fast travel, don't really seem well thought out and are just plain obnoxious. For example, the enemy density in Dragon's Dogma 2 is way too high. You can't walk 10 fucking meters without running into a group of enemies. This really wears down on you after a while, and I found myself just trying to sprint past them. You'll also be pressured to return to towns frequently, whether that be because you're over encumbered and you need to drop items off from your storage, or if you've leveled up a vocation, you'll have to visit a guild to buy new moves, which are only located in towns. Now, I think Capcom could remedy this by allowing us to level up and send items to storage through the campsites. There are campsites aplenty throughout the world, and this would keep players engaged where the game is best, exploring and running around the landscapes of Vermund and Batal. Right now, the campsites are only used for resting to restore your HP, as well as cooking. I do have to do a quick shout out to the IRL cooking cutscenes they have in here. It's just so on par with Dragon's Dogma and Capcom. I love it. Plus, this meat just looks bomb as fuck. Anywho, yes, Dragon's Dogma is about the journey, not the destination, so having limited fast travel makes sense, but it does things to keep pulling you back to the destination or hindering that journey that just feel obnoxious and don't make sense. Also, so I mentioned that the enemy density was a problem, but there is an issue that is further exacerbated. Am I saying that right? Exacerbated by another huge disappointment, which I think was one of the biggest letdowns for me in DD2, is the lack of enemy variety. Now, let me explain by sort of painting a picture for you. I remember when I first stepped into Batal and witnessed its desert canyon landscape was entirely contrasted from the green, mountainous Vermund. My initial thought was, wow, there will probably be some fun new enemies to fight here in this entirely new country and biome. But nope, I was very disappointed to see that you were just fighting reskinned mobs. Sure, the goblins are called something different, but they're just fucking goblins. I thought, okay, well then there must be some new big boss monsters, right? Nope. Still cyclopses, ogres, and griffins. Except the cyclopses wear armor here in Batal. Where are the desert-themed monsters? No mummies, or giant snakes, or scorpions? There's literally nothing new. It's all reskins. I don't know, this just feels like a huge missed opportunity. It definitely felt like there was greater enemy variety in DD1. It feels like they've kind of taken a step back, but they expanded the map. That doesn't make sense. They do introduce some interesting and unique monsters near the end, but there is a huge chunk in the middle that really feels lacking. Regardless, combat is still very fun and engaging, but just what you get here feels like a step back and not what we would expect in 2024. I mean, just compare DD2 to the similar-ish Elden Ring. Elden Ring has tons of new enemies in each of its 6 or 7-ish areas. Elden Ring probably has 20 times the enemy variety of Dragon's Dogma. That's just Shot in the dark here, but that's what it feels like. Maybe even like 50. I don't fucking know. That game, Elden Ring's crazy. That game's a 10 out of 10, by the way. Finally, the last two things I want to mention are some of the controversies surrounding Dragon's Dogma, the performance, and the microtransactions. I'm by no means am a huge performance guy. I can play Tears of the Kingdom. Some of the greatest games ever are 30 FPS, but having a high frame rate is nice and should be expected on better hardware. What's more important though, at least for me, is stability. And I played on the PS5 and it was pretty steady for me. I noticed a few frame dips and some chaotic battles and moments, but 99% of the time it was smooth and what felt about, 40, 50 FPS. However, I do buy all the games I review because, I only got like 350 subs. No one is sponsoring me yet. Looking at you, Raid Shadow Legends, please. I'll take anything. Just joking. I don't want to be sponsored by Raid Shadow Legends. I did play it on PS5 because I heard the PC port was awful. So I didn't want to take any chances with my wallet. So although my experience was good enough on PlayStation, I am bummed that the PC version has gotten a lot of negativity around it because I would have preferred to play it on there. Now, regarding microtransactions, you can buy a few items like the Wake Stones and the Rift Crystals in the store, yes, and it's very stupid and I don't agree with it, but you can so easily ignore them. All the items you can buy in the store are extremely easily obtainable in-game, so the microtransactions themselves don't hinder the game experience at all. Now, what the issue here is that Capcom is being predatory and taking advantage of stupid people because you need to be stupid to actually buy these microtransactions. So there it is. I know I made a skit about it in the beginning of this video because that's what it is. It's stupid. Just ignore them and you'll be fine. Sure, Capcom is predatory, but 99% of big companies are. You shouldn't trust any gaming company. That's just the reality we live in, and we just have to try and be smart consumers. All right, so in conclusion, Dragon's Dogma 2, it's a weird one because on paper, there are a lot of things that kind of left me wanting more. The side quests, the writing, the characters, the traversal can be annoying. The enemy variety definitely missed my expectations. The launch has just been a bit of a disaster, but I only wanted more because the core of what is here is so good. And Capcom does nail what I believe is more important. The pawns, the combat, the world, the exploration, the character progression, and the main quest has some good moments. So personally, I can't help but love it. So with all that, my final score for Dragon's Dogma 2 is a 7 out of 10. I think it's a good game, but it has some big issues and definitely doesn't live up to its full potential. The core gameplay loop can be extremely rewarding and addicting, but it won't speak to everybody. You've probably heard it a million times, but it's definitely a love it or a hate it kind of game. Luckily, I am one of those people that it does really resonate with, and I think it will resonate with a lot of people. I think if you like FromSoft games or older games, then this will be right up your alley, but you can't just recommend this to everyone. And that's okay. Not every game needs to be for everyone. I just wonder what could have been if Capcom had addressed some of these issues. What if there was cool side quests and good characters? What if there was double the enemy variety? I think Dragon's Dogma 2 could have easily been a 9 or 10 if Capcom addressed some of these issues, because the core of what is here is extremely fun and unique. But the big point here being is that I would give Dragon's Dogma 1 for its time maybe about that 8 or 9. It does feel like Capcom took a bit of a step back here, which is a bummer. Phew. All right, that was a long one, so thank you so much if you stuck with me. Let me know down below what your thoughts are on Dragon's Dogma 2. Personally, I'm loving it. Even though it's not perfect, it has its problems. I'm having a lot of fun. I feel like most people that run out and buy it will have played the first game, and so most likely will enjoy it. And I definitely think there's going to be a strong community built here. I, for one, am looking forward to the DLC and my new game plus. Anywho, thank you so much for watching and have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.